What if your best friend told you that he had definite, particular memories from a prior incarnation? That he had been alive before as some other person in some other place and time. He was absolutely certain these memories were real, that he was himself the reincarnation of Napoleon Bonaparte, Julius Caesar, Jesus Christ. Would you, in the parlance of the 21st century, regard that as a mental health problem? I criticize, revile, and reject the concept of mental health itself for reasons that'll become obvious within the next few minutes. I think it's much more useful to talk about these things in terms of the dichotomy of sane and insane. If he is your good friend and you get along, you might say to him, "But Steve, that's insane." And as the years go by, you might come to the conclusion that it's not just that this particular precept, principle, misconception he has is insane. You might come to the conclusion that he himself is insane. So I'll give you the context for this written comment I made in just a moment. I don't want to dilute or slow down the video, but I wrote 23 hours ago on the internet, quote, "I have read a detailed account of a person being executed, which is to say killed, in a small Buddhist village in modern Laos because someone else in the village had a dream revealing that they had magically done something wrong." And I say in parentheses here, not quite witchcraft. This is a Theravada Buddhist context culturally, so it's not quite the same as a Christian having a dream that someone else in the village has cast a curse or engaged in witchcraft, but broadly speaking, a similar sort of question of a sort of spiritual violation that changes the world. Buddhists believe that meditation, if done improperly, can cause earthquakes. And there are documented, historically real examples of people being put in trial and executed, killed for causing an earthquake. That they had done something wrong religiously, ritually, in terms of meditation that caused an earthquake, and therefore they should be punished. They should be killed. Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't know that about. Oh, why? Oh, you didn't know. They didn't teach you that in your high school world religions class. Oh, some white hippie in California trying to get you to pay money for a meditation course, trying to get you to pay money for some kind of ASMR guided meditation app on your phone. No, you didn't know that about Buddhist traditional meditation. That's Orthodox Theravada Buddhism, guys. It's not some modern corrupt cult offshoot of Buddhism. That gets even crazier. Okay, so I've read a detailed account of a person being killed in a Buddhist village in modern Laos because someone else in the village had a dream revealing that they had done something wrong magically, right? And the other villagers found the interpretation of the dream convincing. I just want to pause here again. Which stage of the process is insane? We all dream. We all experience dreaming. Even if occasionally and under extraordinary circumstances, we all experience hallucination. You can experience hallucination just through sleep deprivation, just through exhaustion, and just through illness. And I assure you, in a tropical climate with tropical illness, you experience hallucination even more frequently. I have not spent time in Tibet, but I've known people who did, and they attributed it to the high altitude, whether it's the high altitude or the infectious diseases. And they said, look, you can be a perfectly sane person. And I don't know if it's, the thin air and oxygen depletion or what, but you pass out and experience hallucination more frequently in Tibet than elsewhere. I've even heard that about the high mountains of Greece. And it's talked about in the history of religion in the ancient Mediterranean world and in ancient Greece. Okay, so hallucination is part of life. Dreaming is part of life for everyone. The attitude you take toward your dreams, right? The attitude you take towards your hallucinations, that is either sane or insane. Okay? Do you live in a cultural context in which religion conditions people to regard hallucinations as more real than reality, to regard dreams as more important than reality, to regard dreams as the word of God, right? It's one possibility. Buddhism is not a monotheistic religion, right? To regard dreams, to regard hallucinations as something your deceased ancestors, your grandparents or great-grandparents are telling you, right? There is an important question here of whether we are to be sane or insane. Individually, in small groups collectively, as you move up to the scale of a society of millions. Continue quoting just what I wrote 23 hours ago. Quote, if you have a background in the anthropology of religion, if you have a background in real religious studies, let alone the discipline of cult studies, more or less created by Robert J. Lifton, you will know examples of insanity and its social consequences. People have hallucinations. Those hallucinations can be the founding moment for a new religious movement, and they can also result in terrible consequences in an already established religious context in which people have been trained to take those hallucinations seriously. I heard a detailed account of a whole extended family treating a child like garbage from birth because they believed she was the reincarnation of someone they all disliked. You want to know who I heard that from? I heard it from the psychiatrist who was dealing with the young woman. Now I forget exactly how old she was, to what extent she was a child or a teenager when he was dealing with her. That's not a written account; that's a verbal account I got, and she was explaining that her whole extended family, they called her by two different names. There was, and one of the names they called her was the name of this other person they all believed she was the reincarnation of, and that they quite despised. They were resentful and angry towards her because of what she had supposedly done in her former life. Oh, you didn't know about that kind of problem? Nobody. Oh, do you consider yourself a well-informed person about religion? Yeah, really? What did you learn in high school about religion? Yeah. What did you learn in university? If you've been to university, what did you learn from your white Dharma master, from your white guru in California? What did you learn from Sam Harris? What, really? Oh, am I telling you guys something new you didn't know before? Why is that? Why didn't you know, bro? What? I mean, I'm sorry. Imagine if in high school, this is what you have been taught first and foremost about religion. Imagine if in hundreds of hours of YouTube videos from Matt Dillahunty, if this had been presented to you once, and Matt Dillahunty's not the only one, any of these leaders, Sam Harris has already been mentioned, any of these public leaders, imagine if any of them had either casually or with formal research and preparation told you just the little fucking bit of evidence I have just confronted you with. Imagine the enlightening and electrifying effect this could have on the modern atheist movement. Instead of everyone being lulled into this sense of complacency, that this is a movement that doesn't need to move at all, that doesn't need to face down serious challenges at all, that isn't in the midst of a struggle for whether we are to be sane or insane, that isn't in the midst of a struggle for whether or not people's lives are going to be ruined by these dangerous delusions. Now, I just mentioned, I know, sorry, guys, however many people in the audience, if there are 14 people in the audience, there should be 14 thumbs up. If there are 40 people in the audience, there should be 40 thumbs up, in my opinion. It is possible we have some true believing Christians in the audience right now. It's possible we have some true believing Muslims in the audience right now, or when this video is recorded and uploaded later, that they will see later. You know what the funny thing is? Every single Christian and every single Muslim would agree with what I've been saying up to this point, because it's not about their religion, right? If we're not talking about going to heaven after you die, go to hell, but we're talking about reincarnation, then Christians and Muslims are quite open quite open to this possibility, right? Like, oh, okay. Gee, I guess you're right. I guess that is insane. I guess that is dangerous. Now, cutting off part of your penis in order to keep a contract between God and Abraham that's in the Bible. Oh, how can you call that insane? Oh, how can it be crazy for men to cut off part of their penis and for women to cut off their clitoris? Oh, I mean, who could call that insanity? Now they're offended. Now they're defensive. But up to a certain point in this video, in this discourse, any Christians and Muslims watching, right, they're actually going to be nodding their head in agreement. Yeah, that's crazy. It's when they stop to examine the particular cultural traditions, you might say, that they cherish, that they want to continue, that they have had inculcated into them by their parents and grandparents, and that they want to inculcate into their children and grandchildren. Then it starts becoming difficult to discern the difference between sane and insane. Again, for a good reason, I am talking about sane and insane rather than mental health. All right. Continue this quotation. I promise you it's brief. I just happen to have a lot to say about it. I heard a detailed account of a whole extended family treating a child like garbage from birth because they believed she was the reincarnation of someone else they all disliked, with the evidence for this being magical. And they treated her as if she were responsible for the things they resented that had been done by this deceased relative. Yeah, guess what? Insanity is real, it is common, and it is far more dangerous in a religious context than in a secular, skeptical one. So, why do I say that at the end? You have probably experienced hallucination at some point in your life, even if it's just literally when you had a concussion, when you fell off your bicycle or in a sports game or something knocked you in the head. Again, if you've experienced a tropical fever, there's diseases that exist in tropics, you will have experienced hallucination as a side effect of illness. As you say, sleep deprivation under various circumstances, you can experience hallucination. Okay, but you can have a secular, skeptical attitude toward hallucination. What could be more important in our education than to train people from childhood to be aware of this? Look, you are an imperfect mammal. You are a mammal that's a product of evolution. In some ways, evolution run amok. I do not think the python in the forest is tormented by dreams the way we are as humans. Our intellectual development, which was not guided by a god or a creator or what have you, we didn't develop this level of intelligence in accordance with a blueprint or a preconceived plan. There are many defects, to what we are able to do mentally. For the most part, our really advanced levels of intelligence did not evolve for purposes of survival. They evolved through sex selection in the classic Darwinian sense. We developed this cavity in our mouths that we use for speech so that we could engage in breastfeeding. Then once we had this shape in our mouths, that again, we evolved for breastfeeding. It's very different from the cavity that exists in the mouth of, say, a python, of any animal that doesn't breastfeed. We were then able to use that to make complex sounds. And men and women started selecting each other as mates on the basis of how intelligently we could make sounds with our tongues and our teeth and this shape in our mouth. And we developed verbal intelligence and abstract reasoning and all of these things. And you know what? The parts don't fit together that well. And every time we lie down to sleep, right, all of us descend into madness. And what can I say? For so many hours a day, we experience dreaming. We experience a very strange kind of madness. What could be more important than to train and prepare the next generation? Or you could be a middle-aged person now thinking about this for the first time, and to really understand and really reflect on the fact that your dreams are meaningless. They don't represent a higher plane of existence. They don't represent an alternate reality. They don't represent messages being delivered to you from your deceased ancestors. They don't represent the will of God. And all of these misconceptions about dreams and dreaming and more are documented in the history of religion all around the world. Again, not just monotheist. It's really useful to study some polytheistic religions, some animist religions, and so on, and see that our whole species, everywhere at all times, has been struggling to cope with the often overwhelming experience of dreaming. Now, look, my father is dead. My father has appeared in my dreams after his death. I ascribe absolutely no significance to this whatsoever. There's no symbolic significance to it. There's no magical significance. It's not that my father is delivering a message to me. There's no God behind this. But yes, I remember watching a YouTube video from a woman who was breaking down weeping on camera, talking about a dream she had had the night before, where her deceased mother was talking to her. Her mother was speaking to her from beyond the grave. And she's talking about how real it felt and how her mother's voice was just so recognizable and perfect. And in that case, her husband woke her up. Like, her husband showed, I think they just had something to do that morning. It was a reason to wake her up. He didn't have any bad intentions. But she was furious and really emotionally hurt and was kind of bereaved because she felt her husband had interrupted her in the middle of this dream and had cut off her conversation with her deceased mother. Now, the irony is, if she had continued sleeping, it's quite likely she would not have remembered the dream at all. We tend to just remember what happens at the end of the dream, especially when we're interrupted. So, but obviously this woman regarded the dream as at least having an emotional significance for something I don't have. Now, look, again, just to be self-critical, for many years, honestly, I can't say this now, but for many years, I kept having people I knew in high school appear in my dreams, and I would resent it. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ, I don't like these people. I don't care about these people. I don't think about them when I'm awake. I don't have email contact with them. We're not friends on Facebook. But it's like something, and it probably is ultimately evolutionary. Like on an evolutionary scale, these are like the tribal bonds or connections you formed at an early age. And for me, by the way, it's only high school. I can't remember having dreams with people I knew in primary school or in university, actually. But like, oh God. So I made some kind of emotional connection with these people in high school. And, now, again, not now, frankly, but more than 10 years ago, I can remember having these people come back in my dreams. And it's boring to me. It's like, can't I dream about something of more intellectual substance than this conversation with somebody I knew in high school? And you know what? I think they wouldn't admit it. I think a lot of those people probably have dreams about me. I made quite an impression on people I knew in high school, whether I was their friend or foe, frankly. And you know how it is when you're that age. Quite a number of young women, fell in love with me to the limited extent that teenagers can fall in love. And I know that feels very real at the time. It feels very overwhelming. And when you get older, you can look back on it and think that was really shallow. There really wasn't anything to that relationship at all. And it can haunt your dreams until the day that you die. You can never get over it. You can never get over a crush you had in high school. All right. Now, okay, if we were the product of a divine creator's design, if we were even the product of a reasonably intelligent human being's design, if we were an artificial creation of another human being, obviously we would not in this way be haunted by our dreams from the day we're born to the day we die. All right. It is not having hallucinations versus not having hallucinations that is the difference between sanity and insanity. It is the ability to distinguish what is a hallucination from what is not, and to discard it as merely a hallucination. We all dream, but can you distinguish a dream and discard it as merely a dream, nothing more? That is the difference between sane and insane. And we must, as atheists, as atheist activists, as skeptics, as nihilists, as proponents of science, as proponents of democracy, however you think of yourself, in fighting to drag humanity out of the darkness of the dark ages, we must recognize that religion in principle is insane. It makes people insane. It attracts people who are insane. It rewards people for being insane. Insanity must be on the table. Now, the context for this video, I admit, some of you may be a bit puzzled by. Why today? Why did I wake up this morning and decide to make this video? Over on, I've already shared the link to this in the description, actually. Over on the YouTube channel of An Unrepentant Atheist, there is a very short clip of Matt Dillahunty and his co-host just insulting a caller. So the person who's phoned into their TV show, the person who's phoned in are themselves atheists, and they just say they really want to address the significance of sanity and insanity in religion, and that they regard people who come together and do this every week, who engage in religion's way, as insane. That religion is a mental health problem. Okay, now I've already questioned the meaning of mental health as opposed to sanity and insanity. And what do you know? What a surprise! Matt Dillahunty and his co-host feel that this is their chance. This is their opportunity to show us how morally superior they are, and to utterly revile and insult and ridicule this person for daring to say that religion is a mental health problem, for daring to say that people who believe these things, practice these things, do these things in religion are insane. Now, again, what education does Matt Dillahunty have in life? In my opinion, it's frighteningly close to zero. Matt Dillahunty, sorry, well, let's not get into his CV in this context. I do not think Matt Dillahunty even has the varied experience in life that I had as a scholar of religion, as a scholar especially of Buddhism. He can't make these comparisons. He can't call on any depth and diversity of personal experience. And yeah, I asked this question in a totally different conversation yesterday, just walking around and talking to Melissa. Why do you suppose Matt Dillahunty never learned Arabic? I don't know, Matt, you're trying to change the world. Why aren't you completely fluent in Arabic by now? The last 10 years, he could have become fluent in Arabic. I just mean modern standard, modern spoken Arabic. I'm not saying he has to be a literary author in Arabic. He has to be a brilliant stylist. That's a higher level of achievement. Gee, Matt, you could have learned Arabic. He could have learned Hebrew. He could have learned ancient Greek. He could have learned Latin. He could have learned Sanskrit. He could have learned Pali. He could have learned Thai, Laotian, Cambodian, Burmese. Any of them, not all of them. Pick two. He's been in this game for decades. And the problem is that Matt Dillahunty has learned nothing. Now you look in the mirror, motherfucker. All you fucking people in the audience, what have you learned in the last 10 years? Hey, bro, get on my level. I'm now 44 years old. I've got to ask myself what I can accomplish in the next 10 years. And I can't accomplish jack shit in the atheist movement, in the vegan movement, in the ecological movement. I have other interests. I'm concerned about ecology, concerned about global warming and things like that too. I have no colleagues. I have no contemporaries, because in the last 10 years, you guys have all been playing Super Mario Galaxy. You guys have all been playing Modern Warfare. You've all been playing computer simulations of shooting someone in the head, massively multiplayer online games again and again. You guys have all been so-called enjoying your lives in every way. Nobody has been developing themselves intellectually, right, to play a positive role in the future of atheism, in the future of religion, we can say, nor, in my opinion, in the future of democracy. And what I want to do, I can't do alone. I'm not a painter. A painter can work alone with his or her canvas. What I want to do requires other people, at least 5. I just cannot do this alone. I can't be a colleague of Matt Dillahunty, and there's no one else to work with me on this project. So look, again, Matt Dillahunty is a unique individual. If he wanted to take on Islam the way I wanted to take on Buddhism, right? Think about the work he would have done. If he wanted to take on Christianity, Judaism, what have you, think about the work he would have done in the last 10 years. And now ask yourself, who did that work? And the answer is nobody. All right? Not Matt Dillahunty, not Sam Harris. Sam Harris, who is himself literally a Hindu cult leader, who literally is a meditation instructor, a guru, and a vocal member of a Hindu cult specifically. He also flirts with Buddhism, which is not surprising. He plays games with both Buddhism and Hinduism. But guess what? None of the scientists in the movement have either, right? What, okay, guys, I only have so many years to live. What am I going to accomplish in the next 10 years? And crucially, who am I going to accomplish it with? Look in the mirror. Ask yourself the same question. Now, here is a reply to the, I'm sorry, I know it took me a long time, but the short comment I read to you. Here is a reply from someone in the audience. I don't know them. Pooknotten. I hope that's not a swear word in some formal language, some foreign language that I'm unaware of. He replies, quote, while this may be true, religious belief and mental illness are not the same phenomenon. Many things are rendered more harmful by religious belief and practice. Many mental illnesses can present a danger in and of themselves. Okay, so he is saying mental illness and religious belief are not the same phenomenon. So if he is claiming, if your religious belief is that you are the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, you personally, that's not a symptom of mental illness as you define it. That's not insane. That's not crazy. You guys can Google this in 1 second. You may find it hilarious. Right now in Australia, there is a cult leader. We call him Australian Jesus. There is a leader of a new religious movement. I shouldn't even say cult, who has discovered, he is alive and well in Australia right now. He has discovered that he is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And his proof is that he has specific memories of his former life as Jesus Christ. I always think this is amusing. If someone believed that they were the reincarnation of Napoleon, it would be pretty easy to quiz them about the life of Napoleon with so many details. Okay, and then after you marched from Poland to, what happened? Like the level of memorization you need to actually fake having memories of the life of Napoleon is tremendous. But the life of Jesus is a little bit more vague. And his wife has decided that she is the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene, coincidentally or interestingly. Okay, so that has nothing to do with so-called mental illness. That has nothing to do with the distinction between sane and insane. All right. So again, what if your best friend Steve had the delusion that he was the reincarnation of Jesus or he was the reincarnation of Napoleon? Okay. What if your best friend Steve believed that he could communicate with the ghost of his own deceased grandfather and that this happened regularly, whether through dreams, whether through hallucination, whether through meditation, because meditation very often involves induced hallucinatory experiences. Okay. What if it's not your best friend Steve? What if it's your own mother? What if it's not your best friend Steve? What if it's your own daughter? Just visualize that. Is this a mental health problem? Yes, no, maybe. Is this about the difference between sane and insane? Now, the next comment I'm going to read to you, I did write this again myself 23 hours ago. This is directly alluding to the context of the video I already provided a link to. One of the co-hosts, her name is Shannon, so that's why it begins in the way that it does. Quote, no, Shannon, people who claim they can remember their prior incarnations are indeed treated as if they have a mental illness. There's close quote, just pause. Even in Israel, even in Jerusalem, there are indeed, shall we say, mental health clinics, specialized hospitals for the treatment of the insane that take in people every day and every year. And they have statistics for how many people are treated with religious delusions. So, I mean, obviously, Israel, of all countries, is especially sympathetic towards people with religious, shall we say, religious dementia, religious mania, religious beliefs. And they have to deal with year after year, both local citizens of Israel and tourists, people who've arrived there to visit the Holy Land, people who believe that they are Moses, people who believe that they are Jesus, so on and so forth. So yes, that is like in the real world now already. I'm not saying that it ought to be treated as a form of insanity. It actually is treated as a form of insanity. And again, these people, they like, I'm sorry, Matt Dillahunty, literally a lifelong video game addict. They don't study this. They don't even watch film. They don't go there and visit the hospital and talk to these people. They don't go and interview the psychiatrists who are struggling with this. You could have someone on YouTube. You could have a leader of the movement who's actually doing this stuff. And guys, I'm just being honest with you. If I could earn enough money, whether that's by having enough YouTube viewers or enough supporters, enough donors on Patreon or directly, I would do that. I would very gladly go to Israel and conduct those interviews, and probably it would partly produce a documentary film and partly produce an article or a chapter of a book, if there's enough material, a whole book, write about that. You know, I would be totally willing to do that. And God, I'm not risk averse. I used to live in Cambodia. I'm not scared of going to Israel. I'm not scared of going to Syria right now. I'm not scared of going to Lebanon. I think there were a lot of hard questions to ask about religion. I'm not scared of going to Saudi Arabia. I think Matt Dillahunty is. You know, I simply do not have the money, do not have the support, and do not have the colleagues to do this. Now, Jacqueline Glenn does. She always has had. Jacqueline Glenn, I'm sorry, I'm going to forget the guy's name. She was shouted out by that major leader of the atheist movement. That's right. Yeah, so Richard Dawkins co-signed Jacqueline Glenn and launched her career, her path to stardom. There are all kinds of people who have had those opportunities. I would say Jacqueline Glenn. I would say The Amazing Atheist. I would say Matt Dillahunty. In the last 10 years, they could have done all this and more. And by the way, I am kind of proposing a sympathetic and anthropological approach to this. As I said much earlier in the video, I do think hallucination is natural. I do think dreaming is natural. I do think it's something we all have to cope with to some extent. But there's the question of the attitude we take towards it and how we're educated and how religion religion predisposes us to regard these experiences one way or the other, and the social consequences created by living in a religious context. But I wouldn't be proposing that kind of research in order to condemn these people, in order to ridicule these people, in order to pwn these people, in order to humiliate people. And hilariously, the context for this video being made today is that Matt Dillahunty and Shannon, they get a call from someone who's a sincere atheist and says, he's saying we need to work harder to work for the future of atheism and to overcome religion. And they just want to pwn him. They just want to humiliate him and denigrate him so they can show how morally superior they are, because he's willing to talk about sanity and insanity within religion. So, I mean, this is the state we're at. This is 2023. How many more years you guys think we got? What kind of time? Are you working on a 300-year timeline? 500 years? I can tell you this: religion has not become less powerful and less influential in the world. Have you heard of ISIS? Just look at the map of the world. And guys, I'm an anti-communist. I'm pro-democracy and anti-communism. But since the collapse of communism, has religion become more or less powerful in Russia? Has religion become more or less powerful in Kazakhstan and Central Asia? Now, in China is still a communist country on paper, but it's a thoroughly cynical communist country in which nobody believes in communism anymore. You think religion is becoming more or less powerful in China? As evil and terrible as communism was, it did suppress religion, and that force is largely dissipated in the world. And by the way, we can get into Africa that way too, the influence of communism, socialism in Africa, and then the rise of religion there afterwards. So Melissa mentions East Germany, Cuba. Yeah, but if we're really being honest, you really think in Texas? You really think, you really think in Atlanta, Georgia, religion is withering away? What, because of the technology of the cell phone? Because of the atom bomb? Why? All right. Okay. So I'm continuing my quotation. People who hear voices when they pray, people who see the ghosts of their dead ancestors and so on, along with social phenomena such as cult behavior within religious groups, these people are indeed treated as if they have a mental illness. Dealing with insanity is a serious aspect of the driest of academic discourse on religion. The self-righteous attitude of Shannon Q and Matt Dillahunty, the co-host of this show, is rooted in the most baleful ignorance imaginable. They are both people with zero awareness of the formal academic study of religion and cult phenomena, trying to front as if they know what's in the literature and as if the caller does not. I then have a timestamp. I say at 3 minutes and 54 seconds in this video. Why do you suppose Shannon Q is so uncomfortable with one person being intellectually superior to another? Because she freaks out at this caller and says, you just want to think you're intellectually superior to religious people. All right. Right. Why do you suppose Matt Dillahunty has a problem with recognizing the extent and nature of insanity in modern society? Could it be that they struggle with intellectual inferiority and mental health, respectively? Um, so there's a reply from the host of the channel, the Unrepentant Atheist, and he says, "quote But belief in a god does not necessarily make a theist intellectually inferior to an atheist." Okay. Now, I do think that's an interesting question, and I'm sorry to get into semantics, but it really requires and entails a question of things like how do you define intelligence? If your definition of intelligence is purely mathematical, we have 21 people in the audience live. We should have 21 thumbs up. We should have more. Welcome to everyone who's a true believing Christian here, giving the video a thumbs down. Come on. I think at this moment, I'm preaching to the converted. If you guys share the link with your own grandparents, share the link with with a Reddit group. Maybe some people will see this video and disagree with it, but at this moment, if your definition of sanity, of mental health, come back to this, if your definition of sanity is being really good at math, then I would have to agree. You can have someone who's a brilliant mathematician, who's very good at doing mathematical operations, who is morally insane, like they're a completely unethical person, who's, in the parlance of our times is a psychopath, whatever. They can be a murderer, they can be a rapist. You can have a person who's a very good mathematician who believes that their dreams are providing them with messages from the afterlife, from other, their deceased ancestors. You can have a person who's good at math, who prays and believes that the voice they hear when they pray is actually the voice of God. All of that is possible if that is your definition of intelligence. But it's not mine. It's not my definition of intelligence. And I'm just, intelligence, I'm kind of not going to do it, but you already get a sense. There's more than one way to define intelligence. You could have a definition of intelligence that's mostly focuses on the creative arts. Can you paint a beautiful picture or something? There are different ways to measure and define intelligence. What if I instead use the term competence? Mental competence. If you cannot distinguish the difference between a hallucination and reality, you are mentally incompetent. And I would say, for example, you should not have the role of a police officer who has to once in a while whip out his gun and shoot somebody or make life and death decisions in a split second. If you have someone who cannot distinguish between hallucination and reality and experience hallucination, this came up. I used to be friends with another YouTuber called Vegan Gains. Please don't Google that. Please don't look up. I have a lot of videos on that. And I'm tempted to delete all those videos. But there is another YouTuber who is famous and infamous called Vegan Gains. Richard is his first name. And he has talked about openly the way in which he experiences hallucination. And it is very disturbing. I mean, it's very strange to hear him talk about it. But I have asked him the question, look, Richard, just based on the symptoms you have described experiencing yourself. So to give you an example, someone hugs him and he has the paranoid delusion that they're trying to kill him in that moment. So he has certain kinds of hallucinations, certain kinds of paranoia, and he thinks he's afraid for his life in all kinds of situations, which he isn't. Okay, is that person mentally competent to be a police officer? And the question I put to Richard is, Do you think if you just take the list of symptoms you've described having yourself, the type of hallucination, the type of paranoid delusions you have yourself, and that he's tried to self-medicate for again and again, he's used all kinds of different drugs trying to overcome this or treat this. Do you think that person should own a gun and carry a gun just when they're walking around in public, just based on your? So if you're not talking about yourself, it's just there is a person, and this is what we know about them. Here's the checklist of who I think you would come to the conclusion that this person is not mentally competent to be a police officer, is not mentally competent to own and carry a gun. This is a very hotly contested issue in the United States of America right now. Who is sane and who is insane? Who should have the legal right to carry a gun? Now, there's a further question. If you agree with my proposed criterion of being mentally competent or incompetent, reliable or unreliable, I like to say, do you really believe someone can have these kinds of delusions? Someone can be incapable of distinguishing hallucination from reality, dream from waking state. They hear voices when they pray. They think they can communicate with spirits, their deceased ancestors, God, etc. So they're guided by voices. So you've agreed with me, let's suppose, that person shouldn't be a police officer or shouldn't be carrying a gun. That this is a danger to the public. Okay, well, on what basis would you propose that person can compartmentalize their madness? They can kind of have a compartment over here within which they're insane, and then they can be perfectly reliable and mentally competent over here. Now, I've already proposed, maybe it's possible to be that crazy and still be good at math. Maybe. And you know what, guys? I haven't done the research. I really haven't. Maybe when you look into what it takes to be good at math, maybe even that's not true. Maybe when you get to know mathematicians. I think one of the greatest misconceptions this way is about athletes. When I grew up, there was a widespread belief that athletes were morons and imbeciles, like an elite level athlete, like a boxer or a whatever. And what people have discovered, frankly, just as exercise at the gym has become more common, is that no, there are certain intellectual traits you have to compete on an elite level. The self-discipline and self-control you have to have in every aspect of your life, whether it's diet, exercise, training, the sport itself. We think of sports as something dumb. We don't think of it as like math, but well, you know what? Someone who's a delusional, hallucinating madman in this way probably can't make it, certainly not an elite level in sports. The kind of self-discipline, self-control, competence, mental alacrity you have to have, it probably is incompatible with that. So no, I am proposing to you that instead, if we're really being honest, the type of madness we're talking about here, it totally discredits you. It discredits you in every aspect of your life. That actually we're talking about an absolute difference in intelligence that distinguishes the religious from the secular mind. And the only exception will precisely be the people who are engaged in religion insincerely. And there are millions. There are people who participate in and are a part of some religion without belief. For example, they don't believe in prayer. They don't believe in miracles. They don't believe in magic. They don't believe that it's possible to communicate with the dead. There are millions of people who continue to participate in religion without believing in it. Those will be the sane ones. And okay, now we come back to this question of mental health as opposed to insanity. The saddest comments of all, the most saddening comments of all, in reply to the ones I wrote, are the ones that state, I'm paraphrasing here, but there are several that say something like this in approximately these terms. Oh, well, what you don't understand, what I don't understand. What you don't understand is that a mental health problem can be cured with a pill. Whereas a religious belief cannot. So the problem with mental illness as a model is exactly that it posits mental health as something separable from illness, as an alternative to illness, and that there's a magic pill in a magic bottle that can take a madman and make him sane, whereas there is no pill that can take a true believer and turn him into a nihilist, that can take an uncritical person and turn him into a rigorous skeptic, so on and so forth. And my point here is the exact opposite. religious belief is something you can cure. And most of us have been through it. Most people in this audience right now, at some stage of your life, you had religious beliefs, or you at least had superstitious beliefs growing up. Your parents taught you to believe in something, ghosts, yetis, space aliens. You had some religious beliefs. I was raised by communists. My parents worked very hard to inculcate into me basically magical, irrational beliefs from communism, from Marxism. And at some point, I had to question them and challenge them and overcome them and realize these are theories of economics. I had to realize were untrue. No, belief can be overcome. People who today regard a dream as something more real than reality can develop the perspective that a dream is less real than reality, or is nothing at all, is of no significance. Oh, you can turn the corner. You can overcome that. You can say, oh, looking back now, I realized that was just a hallucination. And that a hallucination is just a hallucination, and that we are all the imperfect products of this process of evolution that took millions of years on this planet. And in many ways, the intellectual faculties we have are almost randomly assembled very poorly and bring a lot of misperceptions and misconceptions into our daily life. That is attainable. And I'm just sorry, right now in Saudi Arabia, how many million people are intellectually capable of achieving the attitudes of just described? They can do it. And they can. Again, I don't know the percentage. Nobody knows. But at least hypothetically, you must realize, look at a country like Indonesia. The people of Indonesia are not born with some disadvantage that makes them incapable of having modern democratic attitudes, such as are common and are prevalent in Japan. The people of Indonesia can catch up to the people of Japan in their level of education, their attitudes towards science, their attitudes towards evolution. And again, I'm using Japan because Japan still is a religious country to some extent. But you're comparing Japan to Indonesia, you're comparing Japan to Saudi Arabia, and it's way less religious, way more secular, way more atheistic, right? Okay, so Indonesia can catch up to Japan, but how? And who is going to step up and make it happen? And let's go. Atlanta, Georgia, Texas, how are they going to catch up to Japan? I mean, I'm sorry, I feel like using Taiwan as an example because we've lived in Taiwan and so on. Again, Taiwan, people certainly engage in religious rituals. They build little lanterns and light them up, and they paint Chinese calligraphy and hang it on the wall, and they do different kind of good luck charms and rituals. But I mean, holy shit. The vast majority of those people are atheists to their bone. They fundamentally have a kind of skeptical, science-based worldview, and then they carry on some of these religious traditions merely as an ornament to that. They say, oh, well, a good example is Kung Fu. They do Kung Fu and Tai Chi and these kinds of exercises. They don't believe there's anything magical about it. They do ghost rituals, but they don't believe ghosts actually exist. Not everyone. You can meet the minority of people there who really believe in ghosts. But trust me, it's one of the most common forms of Taoist ritual is performing traditional Chinese opera. I'm not kidding you. And retelling these stories from centuries past that are kind of like Shakespeare, like what Shakespeare is in our culture. These, Taoist operas are in their culture. They regard it as ritual. They don't tell you, oh yeah, the character in this opera, he's looking down on us right now and we worship him. And like whether or not I get an A+ on the exam is going to be based on how devoted I am and how much I pray or how much I meditate. Okay, well, Texas can catch up with Taiwan. Atlanta, Georgia. We can drag Atlanta, Georgia out of the dark ages and into the modern world in the 21st century. And my question is, how? And my question is, who? Who's going to do it? Not Matt Dillahunty, not Jacqueline Glenn, not the Amazing Atheist, not any of the people you have been worshiping and putting money into the pockets into and have built a movement around, and not any of these, so-called scientists who've been leading the movement for all these years too. Okay, so my question is, who? And if not you, then who? If not now, then when? I'm 44 years old, and I've got to ask myself what I'm going to accomplish before I'm 54. And I've got to ask myself what you're going to accomplish and what we're going to accomplish. So if you are not a bullshit artist, if you want to get real and change the world, hit me up. My email address is a Google search away, and you and I both know Matt Dillahunty won't do it. Jacqueline Glenn won't do it. None of these other phonies who have been cashing in on the atheist movement in the last 10, 20 years, none of them are going to lift a goddamn finger to change the world.